In this section, we're going to talk about the laws of exponent. Laws of exponent, let me start with something very basic. Let's say you have x to the fifth. Remember that we talked about earlier that x to the fifth, x is the base, and 5 is the exponent. So law of exponent is talking about that when multiplying and bases are the same, when multiplying, whenever you have two variables like that with a dot in between, means multiplication. When multiplying and bases are the same, you add your exponent. So that will give you x plus 2 plus 3, which is x to the fifth. So but I don't have to have 2. I can have many of them in rows. So I might have something like x squared times x to the 4 times x to the 6. The rule is still applicable because when multiplying and bases are the same, you add exponents. So that will be x 2 plus 4 plus 6, which is x to the 12. Let me do one a little bit more sophisticated problem. Let's say you have 2x cubed times 4x to the 6. When you multiply again, remember the rule is going to stay the same. That when we're multiplying and bases are the same, we're going to add exponents. So when you multiply these two together, I multiply 2 times 4, I will get 8. And when I multiply x cubed times x to the 6, I'm going to end up with x to the 9. So you don't need to show these steps of adding it. I just did this to start with for clarity. But when you're doing in a problem with more steps, you just add them in your head. 3 plus 6 is 9. What about if I have negative 2x cubed y squared times negative 6xy to the 9? The first thing I would do when I'm multiplying two expressions like that, when there is an x, I would go, I understood 1 here. I put a 1 there to make it more clear to myself. So when you multiply these two, you multiply the numbers first. Negative 2 times negative 6 will give you positive 12. Add the x's. 3 plus 1 will give you 4. 2 plus 9 will give you 11. Now, it's possible to have more than 2 together. So let me do one with more than 2. Let's say you have negative 2x cubed y squared times 8xy times 2x squared y to the 4th. So to do this, for simplicity, we do 2 at a time, but we can do all of them in one step. But it's probably a better idea to do 2 at a time first. So negative 2 times 8 is going to give you negative 16. Add my x's together. Remember, there's an understood 1 here and understood 1 there. 3 plus 1 will give you x to the 4th. 2 plus 1 will give me y cubed, or y to the power of 3. I haven't used the last one, so I just bring it down. Now, in multiplication, order is not important. I could have multiplied the last two together first, but for simplicity, I just go from left to right. Now, 2 times negative 16 will give you negative 32. Add the exponent, that'll give you x to the 6. 3 plus 4 will give you y to the 7th. So that will give you negative 32, x to the 6, y to the 7th. The next kind of problem we're going to do is, what about if I have a scenario like exponent inside, exponent outside? Now we multiply our exponent. Make sure, remember that when we're multiplying, we add exponent. When you have exponent inside, exponent outside, we multiply exponent. Now we extend this courtesy to everything inside the parentheses. So if I have a problem like x squared y to the 5th cubed, then I multiply both of these exponents by 3. So that will give me x to the 6, y to the 15. And if I happen to have a number in front, I do the same thing to the number. So let's say I have 2x to the cube to the power of 4. Remember, there's an understood 1 here. So notice the rule. When you have an exponent inside, exponent outside, you multiply exponent. So that's 2 to the 1. So that becomes 2 to the 4th, x to the 12. 2 to the 4 means multiply 2 by itself 4 times. So if you multiply 2 by itself 4 times, you end up with 16 x to the 12. And sometimes we have a combination of these two together. So I might have a problem look like this. I might have a problem like this. X squared y cubed times x to the 4 y to the 6 squared. To do this problem, I have to use order operation. Order operation that means I have to take care of my exponent first before I multiply it. Remember, the rule, order of operation rules stayed intact all the time when you're doing algebra, right? So here, I have to take care of exponent before multiplication. So that's what I'm going to do first. So it'll be x squared, y cubed, x to the 8, y to the 12. Now, I changed it to one of these problems, right? Notice I did one step, and then I did, now when I'm multiplying, I'm add exponent. So I'll give you x to the 10th, y to the 15th. Add exponent, 2 plus 8 is 10, 3 plus 12. The reason you can't go any further because these bases are not the same, so you don't add exponent anymore. That's the end of the problem. So that's for when you have an exponent inside and exponent outside. The next kind of problem I'm going to do is when you're dividing. When you're dividing, you always subtract exponents. So that will be x 8 minus 2, that will give you x to the 6. But what about if I had it the other way around? What about if I had x squared over x to the 8? Remember, you always subtract the bottom from the top. So it'll be x 2 minus 8. 2 minus 8 will give you negative 6. Now, in algebra, you don't want to leave a number with a negative exponent. If you have a negative exponent, if it's in the numerator, you bring it to the denominator. And if it's in the denominator, you move it to the numerator. By doing that, you drop the minus sign. So x to the negative 6 becomes 1 over x to the 6. You could have also said the alternative way of doing this problem is that when you're dividing, you always subtract the smaller one from the larger one and leave it where the larger of the two is located. See, I will end up with 1 over x to the 6. Same thing here. 2 from 8 will give me x to the 6. The last one you need to know for law of exponent is that if you have a number to a negative exponent, you move it to the, so if it's in the numerator, you bring it to the denominator, and if it's in the denominator, you bring it to the numerator. So that will be 1 over 2 cubed, which is 1/8. And if I have one like this, 1 over 2 to the negative 4, now I have a negative exponent in the denominator, so I have to bring it to the numerator. So I'll give you 2 to the 4th to the positive 1. 2 to the 4th means multiply 2 by itself 4 times. So that will be 16 over 1, which is 16. One last thing about the law of exponent is that any number to the power of 0 is equal to 1. So if x to the 0 is 1, 4 to the 0 is equal to 1, x to the 0 is equal to 1, 2x to the 0 equal to 1. Next, we're going to do operation with polynomials.